From the most storied vineyards in Napa Valley comes an exquisite wine that's hailed the world round as the highest artistic expression of Cabernet, Georges de Latour Private Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon. This handcrafted classic is praised by wine experts and collected by wine lovers for its complex structure and great depth of flavor. Celebrating its 70th vintage, Georges de Latour is led by winemaker Jeffrey Stambor.
So what is it that makes your wine so great?
Well, let me tell you a story. So Georges de Latour came to California in 1900. When his wife first saw the estate, she exclaimed, "Quel Beaulieu."
What a beautiful place.
Right, right. So those two vineyards that were originally planted by Georges de Latour, BV number 1 and BV number 2, are the source of the Cabernet Sauvignon grapes that go into our wine. And Rutherford really is, in California, certainly the premier growing region for Cabernet Sauvignon, and arguably in the world as well.
So it's the terroir?
Well, the terroir is part of it. So the soils and the climate, but it's also the state-of-the-art technology that we have at the new winery. It's kind of like, you know, what goes into making a great suit. It's the fabric, right? But really, it's the attention to detail. It's the craftsmanship that goes into making it. And it's the same with winemaking. It's the attention to detail that really make quality wines. Well, it feels like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Georges de Latour was a true visionary. And after he had discovered this great place in Rutherford, he saw the need for a classically trained enologist. He went back to France and discovered André Tchelistcheff. André came here in 1938 and practically reinvented modern-day winemaking in the Napa Valley. The 1936 Georges de Latour Private Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon is really the first internationally acclaimed Cabernet, or wine, from the Napa Valley. You know, when you think about it, 100 years ago, winemakers didn't have the understanding of microbiology that they have. They didn't have the kind of state-of-the-art technology that I'm able to use. They didn't have finely crafted French oak barrels. My philosophy about winemaking is to do as much as you can in the vineyard to create those aroma and flavor compounds and those silky tannins, and then do as little as possible or as necessary in the winery itself. We're always looking at new ways of doing things, or looking at old ways and applying them in a new way. In fact, 2006 was the first vintage where we started looking at barrel fermenting Cabernet must. It's super labor intensive, but it brings a component to the final blend that adds complexity and depth and concentration. Well, there are really three ways that the grapes get fermented at the Georges de Latour winery. About 50% of them are fermented in stainless steel tanks. Another 10% is fermented in French oak, but what really sets it apart is the remaining 40%. The rest of the grapes are fermented in 60-gallon French oak barrels. And during fermentation, each one of those barrels is a separate fermenter, and so it has to be turned to get the extract of the flavor and aroma and flavor compounds.
So how many others are making wine like that?
Well, really, on that kind of scale that we're doing, nobody that I know of. And then the next step is where the real artistry comes in. It's the blending. So you take all these disparate components and put them together in such a way to produce a high-quality wine. So having been at Beaulieu for over 20 years, the state-of-the-art winery had always been a dream. So having it now at my disposal really lets us focus in on crafting, finely crafting one wine, the Georges de Latour Private Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon.
"13 consecutive vintages scoring 90 points or higher. A passion to continually innovate and improve. The deep knowledge and skills to cultivate these storied vineyards. A new state-of-the-art winery and the relentless attention to detail. Combined, you have the iconic and beloved legend that is Georges de Latour Private Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon. A wine which Robert Parker calls a magnificent California Cabernet that has stood the test of time." Please enjoy our wines responsibly.